Have you ever wondered why a tiny, repetitive sound like a pen clicking over and over can drive you up the wall? But the idea of a huge, risky adventure sounds amazing? Well, today we're going to connect those dots. We're diving into the surprising science that links those small annoyances to some of the biggest challenges we face.
Okay, so picture this. You're trying to focus in a quiet room, and all you can hear is a dripping faucet. Drip, drip, drip. It's simple, it's predictable, and it is absolutely infuriating, right? So what is going on there? Why does our brain have such a massive reaction to something so small?
Well, this is where we hit a really interesting paradox. See, our brains are literally built to be pattern-finding machines. It's how we survive. We look for order, we predict what's coming next. But the simplest pattern of all, just the same thing over and over, can be the most irritating. So what's the deal?
To solve this paradox, we have to understand a core rule of how our brain operates. It's always trying to find a just right zone of stimulation. Not too much, but definitely not too little.
This sweet spot has a name: the optimal level of arousal. The easiest way to think about it is like the brain's own Goldilocks principle. It doesn't want the porridge too hot or too cold. It wants it just right to stay engaged and do its best work.
So what happens when things are too cold, when stimulation is way too low? Well, studies on sensory deprivation are pretty wild. When our brain is starved for input, its performance just tanks. We're talking about really serious effects, like memory loss, social withdrawal, and in really extreme cases, the brain just starts making stuff up. You get hallucinations.
Now, on the flip side, too much stimulation is also bad. But here's the twist. That simple, repetitive sound in a quiet room, it actually acts like overstimulation. It shatters the pattern of silence your brain was expecting, and it forces your brain to pay attention to something that is completely boring and useless. That's the feeling of annoyance.
Okay, but here's what's really fascinating. That just right Goldilocks zone, it's completely different for every single one of us. And that difference often comes down to a very specific personality trait.
And that trait is called sensation seeking. It's basically the measure of how much action and novelty a person needs to feel good, to hit their personal optimal level. High sensation seekers are always chasing the next new, intense thing. Low sensation seekers, they're perfectly happy with a lot less.
And this idea gets broken down into 4 key parts. You've got thrill and adventure seeking, that's the physical stuff, like wanting to skydive. Then there's experience seeking, which is more about new ideas and new sensations. Disinhibition is about loving wild parties and social fun. And then there's the big one for our topic, boredom susceptibility, a deep hatred for anything repetitive.
And this is so cool because you can see how this one trait predicts all sorts of real-world choices. High sensation seekers, they might lean towards jobs like scientific research, love surreal, mind-bending art, and blast hard rock. Low sensation seekers might find more comfort in structured jobs like teaching, prefer art that looks like what it's supposed to be, and enjoy the beautiful patterns of classical music.
All right, so we get that our brains need this just right zone, and our personality dials that zone up or down. But what's the deep, primal engine that's pushing this whole search for stimulation in the first place?
Neuroscientists have a name for it: the seeking drive. This is huge. It's not just a preference, it's a fundamental emotional system. It's fueled by dopamine, and it's the instinctual force behind all of our motivated actions. It's the reason we get up and explore our world.
This system is incredibly powerful. It's what makes us curious enough to wonder what's over the next hill. It's the spark that makes us pick up a new book or try to solve a hard puzzle. And it's responsible for that amazing feeling of looking forward to something good that's about to happen.
So this is the main takeaway right here. Anytime you feel that buzz of enthusiasm, that little spark of curiosity, or a genuine interest in something new, what you're feeling is your seeking drive kicking into gear. It's a core part of what makes us feel engaged and, honestly, what makes us feel alive.
Okay, so now we're ready to connect all the pieces. We've gone from an annoying little sound all the way to this deep, primal drive. But what happens when this healthy, curious, seeking drive goes haywire?
The latest thinking is that addiction is essentially what happens when this powerful seeking drive gets hijacked. Instead of being this flexible tool for exploring the world, the whole system gets stuck. It becomes fixated on one single, narrow, compulsive thing. And that gives you a really stark difference. A healthy seeking drive is versatile. It's open to new things. It finds joy and interest all over the place. But an addicted seeking drive becomes rigid and brittle. It zooms in on one thing. And the tragic result is that everything else in the world starts to seem dull and uninteresting.
And this is a really big idea. What this model suggests is that this hijacking of the seeking system might be the common root of all addictions. It doesn't matter if it's a substance like drugs or a behavior like gambling or endlessly scrolling online. The underlying brain mechanism is the same.
And what's more, this system is fragile. Research shows it can actually be damaged. Things like chronic stress, feeling isolated from others, and especially not having enough time for free, unstructured play as a kid, all of these can weaken the seeking drive and make a person more vulnerable to addiction down the road.
So there you have it. We started with the simple annoyance of a tapping pen, and we followed that thread all the way to our brain's need for a just right level of stimulation, to the deep, primal seeking drive that powers our curiosity, and finally to how that amazing drive can get stuck and lead to addiction.
And that leaves us with a pretty massive question for our own lives, doesn't it? In a world that is basically built for distraction, a world full of easy, predictable little rewards that can so easily capture our attention, how do we protect and nurture the healthy, curious, and adventurous nature of our own seeking drive?